Hi, welcome back to the State of the Nation. I'm your host, Mike Sham. With me today, returning to the State of the Nation, is a businessman turned political activist and author of this fine book, Mr. Songezo Zibi. Songezo, welcome back to the State of the Nation.
It's good to be with you, Mike.
When we last chatted, it was just after the launch of your book. And at that point, you were sort of testing the waters of South African politics. Quite a lot has happened in the life of South Africa since then that needs discussion. You then, in the subsequent time, have actually launched Mzansi.
Yes.
Which is, at this stage, a political movement, with the eye on it becoming a registered political entity, I presume, before the next general election.
Absolutely.
And you have put in a lot of effort, I know, crisscrossing the country, doing focus groups, talking to communities, especially in the Eastern Cape. That seems to be the area of a lot of focus.
8 of the 9 provinces, by the way. In fact, all 9 now, because we've been to the Northern Cape recently.
Okay. And how has the Mzansi movement been received in those communities?
So, thanks again, Mike, for having me. So the first thing I think we can talk about is the lessons we've learned, what we have as a civic engagement vehicle is the Rivonia Circle, which is a non-profit company. And the Rivonia Circle has enabled us to do several things, which is to understand the pulse of South Africans, the political pulse of South Africans. We have 28 million out of 41 million people who didn't turn up to vote in 2021, which means the mess that we see in councils is on the basis of a 30% turnout, basically, in real terms, right, of the vote. So one needs to really understand what South Africans think about politics and what they understand by alternative politics, because that they sit at home and not go to the polls is not just a rejection of the ANC, it's a rejection of the entire ecosystem. You've got to understand why people are not responding, notwithstanding the really desperate conditions in which people live, which is now even the case in this suburb that we're in. Because of potholes and load shedding and water problems and incorrect billing and all of these kind of problems that you know about. So one's got to understand that and do genuine listening and engagement. And so we usually don't use the term civic education. It's really civic engagement with people. And we've done that over 30 times in all 9 provinces. It's not just the Eastern Cape. We've been many times to Limpopo, Northwest, the Free State, Northern Free State, Southern Free State, KZN, Umlazi, Estcourt, Newcastle, etc. Right? And the reason we've done that, the lesson we've learned from that is that people are not apathetic. They're angry. The question is, where does that anger get channeled and how? That's the first thing. The second thing is, who do people listen to for direction in these difficult times? It's clearly not the politicians and so on. So we've learned many lessons, and we've made and built a network over time of people who are doing excellent work in their communities, in their provinces and so on, who are now part of the Rise Mzansi network, because the conversations have been authentic and they've resulted in work being done to improve the lot in those communities, and they're doing it themselves rather than us.
Now, is there not a danger here? I've sat here ever since we've launched the State of the Nation platform, and obviously speaking to somebody like Herman Mashaba, who before he launched Action SA was also, had his own sort of think tank group. The same with Musi Maimane, who's now launched Build One South Africa. It's a common thing that I've heard from everybody is, yes, everybody received us, happy to see us, loved it, engaged us, they're angry, they're this, they're that. Then you go to the polls,
and it doesn't show.
And it doesn't show.
Yes, that's the essence. So let me ask a couple of questions. How many, and I don't want to talk about specific people, so how many of them have this conversation about what values should bind us at community and national level? So we all talk about nation building, right? Mike, what values should bind us as South Africans? Do you have any sense of what those are?
I think in a country as diverse as South Africa, there probably isn't one answer, in my opinion.
Sure. But do you think people, on what basis do South Africans, whether it's at community or province, on what basis do we unite? We retail this conversation, which is vote for me, and I will be the solution to all your problems. Ultimately, at the end of the conversation, it's all about what you're building and what proposition you're placing on the table as part of a collective effort, rather than a big man. So in this conversation, you're talking about Herman. Well, Herman is not the glue, and neither is Cyril Ramaphosa, right? The glue is not the person. It's a value system. It's why you have people in your house. So why should people take us into their confidence and trust us to make communities again if the solution is retail politics? This is what hasn't happened, and what we're doing might be counterintuitive, but we believe it is necessary, because I can share what values we discuss with people. I can share those, and we can debate whether you agree with them or not. But we have that discussion, and people say what they mean to them. And then we talk about a people's manifesto, rather than a manifesto that we're going to present as the saviors that are going to solve all their problems. People want to take care of their own communities, self-sustain, and own this country, because they've handed it over to the politicians for too long. That's a much more difficult conversation to have than problematizing certain types of people, and that if you get rid of them, the problems get better. Or we're going to send more cops to be a lot more violent in how they apply the law, but you're shooting somebody's kid who's drug dependent. How many funerals do you want in this community? And so what is a comprehensive solution that all of us can work on together with law enforcement? So don't infantilize people. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah. Now, your findings have obviously been that people want to, be masters of their own destiny.
Oh, they do.
They want to run their own communities and so on. What is stopping people in those communities from even doing basic things? Litter, for example. You probably haven't been to one community that doesn't look like a pigsty.
So let me answer that, because it's a bugbear of mine, by the way. Well, one of my most popular posts on Facebook was litter, where I come from. So I talk about the Eastern Cape a lot, because spiritually, in the Eastern Cape, I'm from there. I'm from a village, right? But Mike, where I come from, in Mkanduli, there is a rubbish dump. There is no rubbish collection service. We don't even get the black bags that we can go and buy for ourselves, right? The unemployment in the Eastern Cape as a whole is 55%, right? But on a community-by-community basis, can be as high as 80%. People are battling to make ends meet. Mike, people don't even have anything to collect the rubbish with to begin with. And it's got other problems, because the cows start eating the plastic. It causes all sorts of other problems, right? And so one of the things we're working with our activists on is to work with the retail companies, the SPARs, the KFCs and so on, to say, guys, at the very least, do two things. Help us get hundreds of thousands of refuse bags, and we're going to mobilize people in communities, in all the villages. That's the first thing. The second thing, gee whiskers, the rubbish dump for some villages is 30 k's away. I'm not kidding. So how are people supposed to get it there? The infrastructure is not there. So what people want in order to begin to do that is a plan that they can work with at a local level to make their lot better. Otherwise, the only option is protest, right? And this is how we're failing people, by saying civic action, be an engaged citizen. I want to, but I don't even have the refuse bag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why I'm saying the genuine engagement shows you how some of our middle class assumptions are incorrect. They are patronizing. They are full of assumptions that don't understand the conditions in which people live. Then you get retail politics where people talk about things unrelated to the nyaupe and the violent crime and the house break-ins and sort of that people are dealing with.
Those assumptions are often led by observations, though. You know, our middle class assumptions, which I agree are assumptions. What I know about rural Eastern Cape is nil, but it's based on you know, the observations when you drive through
and media coverage, right?
Exactly.
Let me tell you about something else. One of the things that people talk about right across rural South Africa, until veins are sticking out of their neck and here, is pregnancy of kids under 15. And how those kids, in many cases by age 21, 22, 23, are suffering from cervical cancer and other ailments. And they burden the gogos, who are old and unemployed, to look after their kids. Right? And the dads haven't either finished matric and that kind of thing. 7 million South Africans don't have IDs. You know why? They never reach matric. The trigger for you to get an ID as a kid is your matric exam. If you don't reach matric, you don't get the ID. Mike, how do you get a job?
You do not.
And then we talk about job creation in the abstract. So can we blame people for rolling their eyes?
But there are, you know, I'm trying to bridge this gap. I'm on the one hand, you're saying, you know, people can't rely on politicians, but yet they're looking somewhere else for leadership. At what point do people within those communities help themselves?
Mike, what we have not done collectively, and all of us since '94, is to build a democratic culture where the personal and the communal is politics. In other words, it's not about who I vote for. It's about who looks after the community interest. And the community interest is the basis of politics. So last week, Mike, my colleagues were in Polokwane, in Palabura, in Rustenburg, and in Mahikeng. And in all four of those places, people say there is no point to education anymore. So this is shocking and devastating because we think, what? And so the question is, why? They say, well, it's meant to give you the opportunity to get you a job. Firstly, the chances of getting a job are very remote. And even if there is one, you likely have to bribe or sleep with somebody to get a job. With the going rate in some places to get a job, even a temporary one, a contract position in a municipality being about 15,000 rand. Now, when we do retail politics, we say education and all of these things, right? And yet when you understand the granularities of what people are really worried about is, I can't leave my home because these kids who are on nyaupe and that kind of thing are going to rob and stab and that kind of thing. And you realize that a self-animating solution which trusts the people with democratic action and democratic decision-making is a bit more nuanced than that, which is you deal with the corruption, one. Secondly, you deal with the social ills also, which means you also have a local economic and sporting and cultural facilities and so on. People actually have a fairly nuanced and rational conversation. And after that conversation, they say, we can back that because you haven't said, I'm your savior. I will do it all for you. You have a different conversation, which is like, what's the plan? And so what I'm trying to say, Mike, is we must desire and work hard to change the political culture. And what retail politics doesn't do is to do that. What it does is it says, I'm your solution. I will deal decisively with all of these people. We'll shoot the criminals, imprison and chase away the foreigners, and so on. Which is fine, except that if you come from my village, there are just too many youngsters that are in prison. And because they've got a criminal record, they can't work anymore. Right? Nobody's going to employ them. Mike, I care about that. And that I care about that is not because the community cares. It's not because they support criminals. But they want these youngsters to also have a life and look after themselves and be valuable members of the community. So the solution is not just to shoot them on sight. It's difficult politics.
certainly, you so aptly call it retail politics, the best card, the trump card in the pack for retail politics is surely the one that the ANC is using, which is quite simply, we'll do nothing, but we're going to give you money at the end of the month. That seems to be...
No, Mike, can I differ with you?
Please, I'd be delighted if you could.
People appreciate the social grants because there's food hunger in South Africa.
Sure.
They hate that they depend on them. So some of what people say is that part of the problem in this country is that men don't have their dignity anymore. Why? Because they don't work. I must tell you, as a black man growing up in a village, Mike, I have to get a job. I have to look after my mother and other people in my family. Other girls and boys are doing the same. There is dignity in that. There is dignity in that. People don't want handouts. But the old woman who's looking after the great-grandchild because the last person to have a child here is 13, and the mother who is in her late 30s is working as a security guard somewhere, that person needs help. You understand? So we gotta understand how people genuinely feel about these things. If that was true, we wouldn't have 70% of the people abstaining. They would be showing up in big numbers to vote for the ANC, and yet they don't.
One could also argue, Songezo, that 70%, surely a meaningful number of them, would say the ANC has absolutely betrayed us. We will give our vote to somebody.
They say, who?
To anybody else. I'm saying that surely the act of abstention is almost showing, it's almost support.
Mike, can I share an anecdote with you?
Please.
So in another meeting that we're in, an old lady says, what you're saying to me, this argument, if I'm going to a funeral and I need an outfit and all I find in the store are miniskirts, you telling me to wear a miniskirt? Right? It's an outfit. At my big age, I can't wear a miniskirt. Mike, the problem is retail politics infantilizes people. It doesn't want to ask, what will change your lot in your community? How do you want me to do politics? With you, not for you. We're constantly asking people who come from a culture of communities doing things for themselves. My school, Pangindlela, was built by the community. It was mud school, but the community was very proud of that school, right? And it's still very proud of that school. We would leave a desk outside and get punished on Monday because when the principal walked in there, that desk was still there. What has the ANC and the rest of the political culture, what have they done? We will do it for you. Sit at home, and then they don't do it.
So then, if they don't do it, why has the community then not built their own school?
Mike,
like your community built a school back then.
The question is, what is the catalyst for community action? So do you now understand why Rise Mzansi exists? Because you do politics differently. Mike, you can't ask people. Let me put it to you this way. Mike, it is important that I am from that environment. I understand the dynamics there, but I have had the fortune through this democracy that we have to be able to move also in elite circles in this country. Because when I have the conversation in different communities, I am able to animate and make things happen.
Okay.
Let's think about that example of just rubbish bags.
Yes.
Right? Mike, we can't ask people with nothing to do a lot. You know what I mean? Especially when the culture says we will do things for you. And then it doesn't do things for people. So all I'm saying, let us accept voters as thinking beings.
Yes.
Who are actually really the security guard at the gate in some office park is a senior preacher in their church. But we infantilize them in the office park because we look at economic class and we use that to extrapolate their intellectual capabilities. And that's what this politics of a long table on the stage with the leadership addressing everybody else does. It reduces that person into a listener who must be told how the politics must work. And that's, if you want to ask what's different between Rise, Mzansi and everybody else, we don't do that. Mike, we hardly do stages. We don't. We sit here together with the community and everybody gets to have a say. And sometimes we get very little chance to speak because people get to speak and then they get to do. Because all we've done is we've facilitated a politics that's solutions orientated.
Okay, so under the current rules and of the game, Rise Mzansi, you've got a big emphasis on community involvement.
Yeah.
How does that translate where we are just looking at proportional representation type of politics as we have in South Africa?
So, Mike, as much as ideally we would have wanted a collection working with many others, and by the way, we're building a national coalition too, involving different stakeholder groups and interests in business, in development, in the NGO sector and that sort of thing, because we think democracy from the ground up is important. But in terms of South African law, you have to register as a corporate political entity, a political party. And therefore, one of the things that will happen soon is that Rise Mzansi, on the basis of this consensus and the People's Manifesto that we've started building and talking about with people right across South Africa, will register as a political entity that will contest the 2024 election. Now, let me say this, because as we're speaking, the people that are watching and listening to this are saying, oh yeah, but yet another one. The difference between ourselves and I don't know what others do is that, Mike, we want to work with everybody else, the Musis and so on. But Mike, we can't get into retail politics, all of us, because we're still going to yield the same small difference that basically retains a status quo and South Africa becomes a failed state. Somebody must attempt to do the politics right and collaborate with others who may be doing the politics differently, right? But collectively together we do. And one of the reasons I mentioned values, Mike, and you will see in the next few weeks when we table a document that begins the conversation about what a future South Africa looks like, you will see that right at the top is a vision, and Mike, it is values. You do not unite a society under a person or a political party. You unite a society on the basis of shared values. And so some people might feel, yo, that's too hard. We want it too hard because the ordinary people get it.
Okay, so the future's in collaborations?
Oh, absolutely.
So who would you collaborate with politically?
We would collaborate with people who believe in these values. And by the way, when we release this document, it's not too long, Mike, it will be less than 20 pages, is that we'll name the values.
Okay.
I can tell you what they are.
Yeah.
It is a value of freedom, not just freedom from oppressions, freedom to do certain things. So it doesn't just have to be allowed, basically not decriminalized by the statutes. There needs to be a realistic opportunity to pursue the freedom and realize it. The second one is justice, Mike. Justice is not equality before the law. It's actually fairness. Because under this same value, you can talk about redress on a non-racial basis. You can also talk about distribution of resources. Mike, the reality is the residential complex I live in, has got more economic means than Olivenhout's 4 kilometers away. Mike, we must be a society that says Olivenhout's must get more allocation than my community, where I live. We have to do that. That's justice, Mike. The third one is solidarity. We must be a society that refuses to leave anybody behind, which talks to what our just social approach to mutual development, community development, giving opportunities to talented individuals, and how we bring up those. For instance, a person who's been in prison, do we throw them away or not? Right? That's social solidarity. The next one is integrity. And the reason is not the corruption. Right? The integrity is that democracy is a contract. It is a moral contract which requires that the system is transparent so that the people who are the real owners of the democracy that put people in positions of power can hold them accountable. It builds certain things into it, right? Those values are important, and therefore, you ask me, who would you work with? You sign up to those values, or we arrive at an interpretation of those values, we are all in the game. It's not on the basis of who's got better appeal, because I'll tell you, there are some people with dangerous opinions in this country who's got lots of appeal.
Sure.
We've got to be able to say, we don't agree with your values.
Yeah. Okay, so you've mentioned some of those values, and they're noble.
Yeah.
Every single political party, right? If you ask them, they were sitting around the table. We had the leaders from every party. We choose them, top 10.
Yeah, and what do
right?
they say their
They
values
will
are?
all have those values.
No.
Wait, before you say no,
Yeah.
right? We've got ANC's got an integrity commission. Right? Right?
Yeah.
They talk integrity all the time.
Right.
You got the EFF, they've got freedom in their name.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You've got the DA that say justice,
Yeah.
economic justice.
Yeah.
Right? So, what I'm saying to you is this is all very noble, Songezo. The bottom line is that everybody agrees with you. Okay? But they don't. Do you understand what I mean? I'm saying,
I get
as a lifelong Catholic, right, everybody says, oh, God, all the commitments, we'll go into and confess.
Can I give you very practical examples of how you ensure integrity in our political system? Because it's not just about whether you can trust the person or not.
Yeah.
The system, in terms of its laws and rules and policies, has got to do that. So let us say, which is completely allowed in the law, we will publish every 3 months all the contracts that the municipality has awarded. We will say who has received those contracts, and we will also say whether any of those entities or their directors have given to political parties. Mike, that's how you ensure integrity in politics. You don't say, trust me, I was a priest. Right? You say, Mike, for critical positions where the executive in South Africa has got huge discretionary powers to appoint a police commissioner and this kind of thing, those are going to need a public confirmation process. No more will you guys just appoint a municipal manager. Those people must be interviewed in the way that we interview a public protector, so that we can take collective responsibility when they go rogue. Some of what that will do, it weeds out the bad elements, because now the press has got an opportunity to look into Mike's background and say, hey, how is Mike being interviewed for this role? He's all over there. So we're not just saying it as a nice, airy-fairy thing, this integrity thing. We're saying build a system that ingrains integrity. Make the statutes do that. I defy you, Mike, to tell me 3 political parties that give values that kind of solid, practical interpretation and have us here around the table.
Yes.
I defy you to tell me which one.
They're all going to say it. They might not live it.
I'm saying it now. Have they said it before?
Well, I mean, you talk about open processes, and we had a very open process in the appointment of this public protector. Very open.
Yes.
We knew exactly what we were getting.
Yes.
Right? She had a bad track record. She had all these skeletons that weren't even in the closet anymore. They were exposed for all to see. But the majority parties who preach integrity and preach all of these values still...
Mike, again, if you just talk integrity and you don't build a set of rules which ensure it, right, it's not a foolproof system. But let me give another example. There is a controversy around one of the president's new ministers, right? Because they may not have obtained their qualification. And so you get all of these things about people that get appointed. Mike, the political party then that has the power and makes the choices has to take a conscious political decision, as the ANC did, right? They have to take a conscious political decision that we are now going to expand our political capital to still appoint this person and risk getting punished in the vote later. But the process is there. But guess what? We only do that with a public protector. What if we get a Reserve Bank governor who has not been subjected to scrutiny? An NPA director? A National Police Commissioner?
We've been there and done all of these.
No,
things,
we
by
haven't.
the way.
It's not in the statutes, Mike. That's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
not in the statutes. Change the law. Change the law to lessen the opportunity for dodgy characters to be appointed by discretion. You don't airy-fairily say, let's get people who are born again. You change the rules, and that's the difference between us and how we understand how you translate values into action, and everybody else wants to retail the rhetoric.
Okay.
But are fundamentally saying, trust me because I'm a prophet on Sunday.
Yeah. Now, we've recently, had quite as I said, mentioned that we've interviewed a few people, Musi being one of them. And what we keep on hearing, the thing that I keep on hearing is, you can't have this rich community having more resources than the poor community because they can afford more, right? What role are we going to scrap tax?
No, why would you do that?
Well, because, this goes back to the old argument of the previous mayor in Johannesburg, one Mr. Mashaba, who had the problem about whether you cut grass in Sandton or you do something in Diepsloot. Logic says you go to Diepsloot, they need all the help they can get, but all the taxes and the rates are coming from Sandton.
No, Mike, let me stop you right there. Everybody, including the really downtrodden, unemployed people, pay tax in this country. It's called value-added tax, Mike.
Songezo, that's a very thin argument.
It's not a thin argument. We must be careful of these arguments, Mike. And I'm gonna take on you. We must be careful of these arguments because it's part of what we use to infantilize people who should have as much democratic voice as we do here, right? When we have our engagements in villages and informal settlements and peri-urban areas, we say, because people believe this lie, we say, you are also taxpayers. When you go and you buy Coca-Cola or whatever, you pay. You even pay a sugar tax. You are a taxpayer. And when these people steal the money, they're stealing your money too. Am I right?
Correct.
There you go. Let us not have this argument that says the real taxpayers are there, because for those people, the little they pay in VAT is a lot.
Yes.
For them.
But there is such a thing as realpolitik, which even Mzansi is going to be subject to, right?
Right.
Which says that if I'm doing a job as a chartered accountant,
correct,
very, very important job.
Yeah.
That's all great. I am a global citizen at that point.
Yes.
Right? And my life needs to, I don't need to have a blue light on my car.
Yeah.
But if I don't get the quality of life that I could be getting somewhere else, I will go somewhere else.
What does that have to do with tax?
It has a huge amount to do with tax. And let's go back to where we started the thing. It goes back to potholes in suburbs, right?
Yeah.
And viewing those potholes, which is literally where the rubber meets what used to be the road, right? which can lead to a very, very destructive brain drain, right? Now, we all understand, and I think South Africans have been incredibly patient. And in fact, I think that South Africans have been extremely generous, right, in understanding the plight of the people in South Africa who are less well off.
Yeah.
Right? But that's been betrayed.
So
now, along comes Songezo and says, it's been betrayed before because they said one thing and did another, or they stole the money. But in actual fact, when I come in, I'm going to punish you again by putting all the resources into the communities that aren't
No,
generating.
I didn't say all the resources, Mike. So let me say a broad thing about tax. Now let's go back to the values, you see?
Yes.
Because they're not airy-fairy for us. Right. Remember, I spoke about solidarity,
So
right? Hang on, I'm going to practicalize it.
Please.
Solidarity. I said solidarity. We are a people who don't want to leave anyone behind, right? Now, Mike, let me practicalize a problem for you. You have communities in South Africa that have excellent social infrastructure, right? Because of where they're located. They've got sporting facilities. Okay, I worked in UTNEC. Muir College is a public school. I wanted to lie down on the grass in that school, right? Because the kids, actually the talent can come out, right? But where I come from, there's not one.
Yes.
Okay. Now we talk about allocation of resources that collectively we've pulled together. You've taxed companies and so on. Mike, I challenge you yourself amongst your own listeners and people who are watching. One of the reasons this value of solidarity is that South Africans actually don't want a Siya Kolisi to be an exception. They want 100 Siya Kolisis, right?
Yes.
But the way to do that is to make sure that we have a principle in our society that says we're not going to make it impossible for at least 50 Siya Kolisis to come up. We make the choice as a society to do that with public resources. The problem of tax and tax compliance and the bitterness around how tax has been used has been the corruption. It has been the incompetence. It has been the cronyism. It has been the dishonest use of black economic empowerment to advance cronyism rather than to really develop people.
Okay.
Right?
You've opened up a whole lot of questions.
Yeah, let's have that conversation.
Let's go. For starters, who is ever going to disagree with you that we want 50 Siya Kolisis, right? Nobody is sitting back there saying, that's not what we want. Do you know what?
But then don't invest in that community so you can get the 50.
The danger is, danger with your Muir College example is that let's develop the dusty township field, but let's not destroy Muir College at the same time.
Mike, I agree.
But it is kind of being dressed up in many cases like one equals the other. We can't have this one without destroying that one. And I'll give you a practical example.
With BEE, Mike.
Yeah, no. It's the same argument. In my opinion, we're going to get to BEE in a second. It's the same argument as saying, well, we've watched a good rail system get dismantled.
Yeah.
Okay, to nobody's benefit.
Yeah.
Right? Under the guise of saying, well, you know what? These were in communities that benefited from the old system, and now it's Mike. Gone, and you shouldn't be harking back to the good old days. You know what I mean?
Mike, I don't think that's why.
The government does do that a lot. And what I'm saying is that no political party rushes to the defense of the country, of the citizens, when you see that wanton destruction, when you see the destruction of Eskom, when they say, no, the problem isn't that we've allowed Eskom to be destroyed. The problem is that it was only built to service whites. You want to say,
but that's not
30 years
that's
later.
Not why it's being destroyed. Mike, I mean, I agree with you partly, but I disagree with you on the logic. Mike, I don't know how many black people you know, but we all
Some
upset.
of my best friends are black.
But Mike, all of us agree these things are wrong.
Yes.
It's not a color thing.
Yes.
Okay? It's also why I'm able to talk about BEE, because it's clear that BEE has been hijacked to advance corruption and cronyism. Right? We can see that. Black people will tell you that. But are we against the idea, out of the value of justice, that because our historical system, it's not about Muir College and so on, our historical system was about dispossession. It was about denial of opportunity for a specific type of person. That as a society, we choose to do something about that because we're not ahistorical. We're not going to do it in a way that problematizes certain parts of our community, because history is history, it is what it is. But we choose to make sure that these disparities don't exist anymore. We're going to do it in a way that is transparent and in a way that is just. Right? Mike, I'm still waiting for someone to tell me which ship brought cattle to South Africa. Which ship brought cattle to South Africa? And yet white people ended up with cattle. I'm not saying take away white people's cattle. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying we must acknowledge the history for what it is. There's nothing you can do about the past, Mike, as a white person. Nothing. You can't change it. Right? A lot of white South Africans were too young. So we're all sitting with the same problem.
Yes.
But for God's sakes, let us work together to solve it and not try and do it in a dishonest way where we mischaracterize the argument, because the ANC's destruction of state infrastructure through its corruption and its corrupt networks is not black economic empowerment.
But it is.
It is corruption.
But it is defended.
By whom?
Under the guise of black economic empowerment.
By people in that crony ecosystem.
Oh, go look at any Twitter feed. You'll find more than just a few people inside their crony system
Mike,
that are prepared to defend it.
Mike, Twitter is the smallest of the digital platforms.
Right. But
You've got to be careful about how seriously you take Twitter. They don't. Mike, if Twitter was a thing, the EFF would win every election in South Africa, and they don't.
Songezo, let's get practical. You're a guy who's been, you know, you've sort of, your life, which I find fantastic. You know, the Songezo Zibi story should be a movie. Oh. You know, if you're in America, they'd be making movies. Mike, we'd be winning. You know, Will Smith would get another Oscar. But
they're part of that life. I wouldn't want in a movie.
But you have straddled the breadth of the South African experience, right?
Yes.
Now, there's a thing that I don't quite understand. Maybe you can help me. Yeah. Surely, if I have never met an organization or a successful leader of an organization that hasn't looked at an example of what they want to be, hasn't looked, and if you're going to run a football team, if I made you the manager of a football team, if I made you the manager of Supersport United, you'd probably say, I want to be like Mamelodi Sundowns. What are they doing that I'm not doing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I want to be like Manchester City. What are they doing that I'm not doing, etc.
Yeah.
If you're running a country, surely you look at another country and you say, you know, I could see us, because I mean, that was done to great, people must understand that the South Korean miracle is because the South Korean leaders looked at Japan and they said, what has Japan done? And they copied them move for move.
Of course.
Right? So please explain to me two things.
Yeah.
Firstly, on the plus side,
right.
Who do we want to look like? Firstly.
Oh, yeah.
Secondly,
that part,
some of these policies that we've got that we want to do, let's take BE as a classic example. Where has a policy like that worked? Okay, because I understand business, you understand business. Give me a load of legislation and give me enough money. I'll work my way around those things easily, right? No problem. This becomes a tick box exercise.
That's 2 long questions, but let's do them.
But let's go. What does South Africa want to look like?
Mike, here, on the State of the Nation, I am about to share information that is not public.
Okay.
But because we are mere weeks away from releasing the document, I will share it with you.
Yeah.
Mike, this is what has been missing in South African politics. So what you will see in this document is not just an airy-fairy vision. It will be specific targets we need to reach within one generation. We need to move from being South Africa right now to being Korea in 20 years. Our Human Development Index needs to move from X to Y. Our labor absorption needs from X to Y. Our transparency index needs to move from X to Y, and so on. Because, Mike, that disciplines you to say with each term, how far am I along that road? We don't do it in South African politics because then you can't be held accountable for it after 5 years. So that's going to be one of the big shifts. We very specific about what we propose South Africans should start discussing as a principle. Tangible targets. So in certain instances, we want to be a Korea. In certain instances, we want to be, because it's comparable. You can go and have a look, right? So, Mike, there is a whole section on that in the document that's going to come out. And you can look forward to it, and we can have another conversation. Or with my brilliant colleagues who've been working on this public discussion document. So that's the first thing. The second thing, Mike, is let's discuss black economic empowerment. Let me define it for you. And I'll start with the problem. And I'll have inequality in that conversation. One of the reasons our inequality is so bad is that we've got too many people who earn nothing. And this conversation gets weaponized to say it's because white people are rich. That's also, you've got lots of rich white people, much more than black people on a per capita basis. But the reality is you have millions who don't earn an income, who don't have the possibility or even the ability to earn an income. Why? Because they either just have matric or they've failed to reach matric at all. Mike, whether you're black or white, and I'm not saying let's not do the high economy stuff, if your conception of black economic empowerment excludes any conversation about what those people are going to do to get a leg up in life and build a prosperous life, I am not interested in having that conversation with you, because your vision of black economic empowerment is incomplete, right? That's where we got to start. And it's not to say there are not enough talented black people. So our definition of black economic empowerment starts at an individual early level. Mike, if black children, by the time they're 7 or 10 years old, have not had the kind of access to early childhood development and nutrition and so on, the opportunity or the possibility that they're going to reach their full potential and be global entrepreneurs are dimmed. Because we've neglected villages, the service delivery is poor. So what I'm trying to say to you is that people focus on this, and I'll come to the BE. People focus on this thing about whether you should get a shareholding in a certain company. Mike, here's my personal view. We must move past the belief that in order to get black economic empowerment, black people must get a tiny slice of something that white people have built, however they've built it. Mike, I want to see 100 Adrian Gores who are black or who are women of all races, right? I want to see a macroeconomic policy environment that recognizes who's got access to training and skills and mentoring and who doesn't, and makes sure that both on the basis of a social contract and policy intervention it happens, so that when we deploy the capital, whether it is public or private capital, the chances of failure are reduced. And that person can be a proud black business person who says, I built this business myself, and it's now a global business. We've got too few of those people. So that's what I believe we should do as a society. What we've done, though, is we've tried to replicate the post-colonial economy and say, if you get a slice of the economy that white people built, then we have transformed society, but we've got millions of kids who can't even get a leg in. That's not black economic empowerment. It's elite empowerment.
What you're talking about is human empowerment.
It's human empowerment, which is why when we spoke about that document, we said what? Human Development Index. Because if you measure it, you're able to say, I will make these interventions so that I can get this specific outcome within 20 years. Okay,
so in closing, does President Songezo Zibi, please go on, because I'm a big fan, does President Zibi scrappy?
We will have in place a version of empowerment that is premised on the values of justice and solidarity in South Africa. That's what I will say. The reason I'm putting it this way is that when we release this discussion document, it will be a discussion with society. We will offer what our thoughts are and the kind of conversation we need to have. And the reason we talk about a People's Manifesto is so that, Mike, you can engage with that section, write to us and say, this is how we should do it. Right? I believe it will achieve these measurable outcomes. Because again, saying I'm going to scrap BEE and replace it with nothing and no targets is the same problem we've had all over the years, right? And I think we've failed ourselves. We have failed black people by doing that. And we have...
Because by maintaining it, what you're telling black people is you're not good enough.
There is an element of that, Mike, that you can't start your own business.
Yeah. So it's only him.
Right. So they must get you and black people are incredibly entrepreneurial.
Absolutely.
Right? They're incredibly entrepreneurial. But when you have sued your communists who say, oh no, we don't want the private sector, well, I'm sorry, Mike, the person who owns a KFC, Zinumzi, that I went to school with, who is a growing entrepreneur, right? I want him to have 15
Sure.
KFC branches,
Sure.
right? And his children and my children and everybody's children looks at him and says, I want to be like him,
Yeah.
right?
Songezo,
That's the future that
I want
that
to
we
close off just by asking the very last question, which is, will Rise Mzansi resonate in urban areas as well as township areas?
Absolutely. And the beauty of it is that everything we're going to put out in the public domain from now on is designed to invite participation and feedback, because that's what we actually need to do with South Africans, and not retail these things.
Yeah.
Right, which is what we do. Put up a gazebo, give people a membership form, join the party, let's get the ANC out. Come on, Mike. That's different to the conversation you and I have just had.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very, very welcome voice of reason, Songezo Zibi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Mike.
You did say, and we've got on tape, that you're going to come back when you release your...
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We're going to have this man back in the chair. Really love what you're doing with Rise Mzansi, and all the power to you. If you've enjoyed this discussion, please subscribe to our State of the Nation channel so that you can get all of these interviews and more. Songezo, thank you so much for joining us today. To everybody that's watched it, thank you. Subscribe to our channel. We'll see you the next time. Thank you for joining the State of the Nation today.